Well, welcome everybody to another Out of the Box video recording. I'm here today with Dianne Shelton. And Dianne, welcome this morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Connie, for having me.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's give everybody a little bit intro into who you are. Dianne is a former Fortune 500 management consultant turned award-winning business coach and systems strategist and the founder of Passion Breakthrough. Her mission is to help women implement practical strategies and simple systems so they can build their thriving online businesses. And her work has been featured in places like Fox, NBC, MarketWatch, and Digital Journal. And so I'm so excited to have you here, Dianne, because processes have been a thorn in my side. Tell everybody a little bit about why you're so passionate about that and how you got, because we talked originally, we did a podcast swap and we've talked a little bit about that. That's your gift. So tell everybody how that got started.
Yeah, well, first off, you're not alone. This is one of the things that I tell my clients all the time. And so I got started because, as you mentioned, I used to be in the tech world in my corporate days. So I did it for over 10 years. So I got a computer science degree and I've always loved tech. So for over 10 years, I was helping Fortune 500 executives to, make $1 billion more. But then after a while, it's just like, is this really something that I want to continue to pursue? And I got into coaching women, like empowering women because it's such a male dominated industry. And then after a while, it's just like, okay, this is my gift. I love helping other women to really continue to pursue their dreams and build their own business and continue to really have this freedom-based lifestyle. And after a while, all of my clients were, living their dream life. And then I kind of got jealous and I was just like, I'm going to go all in on this. And then I went full-time in my coaching business and the rest is history.
Nice. Well, congratulations for making that leap. That's a big jump. And it's always exciting to celebrate that with you. And it's exciting also to have somebody with this brain that can also see somebody's vision of where they want to go in their business, but also help them see the steps to get there. And a lot of times for me, I was thinking about this morning, processes in general. I think it's interesting because I met a couple of people who started in tech who processes are their thing. And I've always been in accounting. And I was trying to think back did I ever have a job pre being in business? Because I've now been in business 20 years. So this is a long time ago, people. Was there any processes in place at any of the small businesses I worked with? And I would say, no, there wasn't. And when I went into public accounting, was there a process in place? No, there wasn't. It was usually just training, word by mouth training to the next person who took over. And I could see where that failed a lot, but that's what I knew. That's what I tried to implement in my own business, and it failed many times. I'm really cute, but it takes me a long time to learn a lesson. And so people who've been listening for a while know that learning through hiring team was a big thing for me. And so it wasn't until I finally got an intern, I brought in 2 interns, did we finally get a process in place that worked for me. Again, this was trying to find the thing that was right for me. I tried to do it like how everybody else said, but I kept hitting roadblocks on it. So share a few things with our audience today that might help them get out of that trap of, I've tried this, it didn't work, I don't know why. Or even, I think the next question I'm going to ask, if you want to implement these together, is why are processes important? Maybe we should start there.
Yeah, so I love the questions you're asking and the stories that you're telling too, because honestly, I'm also the person that's just like, I don't learn my lesson very easily in some areas, right? And it's just one of those things that sometimes, like you see all of these success stories online. And it's just like, okay, well, this expert is telling me XYZ, and maybe I should try that in my business. And to your point, you really need to do what's best for your business. So the things that you and I are going to tell our audience today, they need to take it to heart and take a look at their business as well. So I think you're right on in terms of like, let's talk about real quick what processes are in terms of, like for your business, for small businesses in particular, right? And to me, processes are not necessarily just, like systems. Processes really contains like the standard operating procedure for doing something in particular. So that involves people, that involves tools, and that involves like the steps it takes to get something done. So it's just one of those things that sometimes people think that, okay, like process or systems mean that I need to implement a tool to get the job done. But it's both ways. It's people, and it's the knowledge, and it's also the tools. So that's what to me that system is. So hopefully that was helpful explanation of that. And then you mentioned something in terms of like hiring someone, right? I've had a hiring fail in my life. So I just want to quickly tell you about that, that when you hire too soon, like people say like all the time, like, I wish I would have hired sooner, but that's not necessarily true. Sometimes when you hire too soon and you're just like, okay, do this for me. It's just like, I don't know what you want me to do exactly. You need to really be clear in regards to what you want that person to do. And then hand it off with that, to your point, the clear process of what they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I can vouch for my drop and run management style in the beginning was horrid. I apologize now to all those team members that had to live through that. But I didn't know. We were so busy because let's go back, is if you're still in hustle phase, if you're still in that growth part of the business, that's kind of how your management style is, because you're so focused on trying to get clients in the door that interacting with your team, if you have not thought through a process or written it down or thought about what that would look like, looks a little bit about you just want somebody to show up and take some of that weight off of you. The reality is that if you haven't thought through of what your culture is and what you want them to do, granted, a few of us have made some excellent hires that can walk in out of the door and like put things into action. And that's rare though. That's really rare. And that unicorn is going to show up better if you have a stronger idea of what that's going to look like. Even from the fact of, I wrote an article about disasters in business, and we did a clubhouse on this a few months ago. Do you have a process is the same thing as like if there was a natural disaster in your area, how would you communicate with your clients? How would you communicate with your team? What would you do with the office? What kind of things would need to happen for there? So processes happen all throughout the business. It's not just how to do one particular thing, but people get stuck on how to capture that or how much detail needs to enter, or for me, I can get lost in the details too. And so what are some tips to get started, or if somebody's stuck in that process, how can they step back, or what should they do to step back to think about this in a different way?
Yeah. So for people, like for my clients, what I tell them is, like they really need to start with the end in mind. What I mean by that is we come into the business because we want to make a difference in someone's life, right? In terms of like, we're here because we want to help our clients. So what is that transformation that you really are trying to provide your client? We're not here because we want to buy the next best tool out there, or we want to sign up for the next free tool that comes in our way, right? So I look at it from an analogy of tools are really just the vehicle to get us to the next phase of our business. So I like to look for simple and like scalable tools. So for example, like I'm the free emailing tools like MailChimp and those kinds of stuff. That's great if you're just starting out, but keep in mind that those tools may not grow with you when you're like, 5 years down the road. And now there's that hassle of you're trying to move to the next bigger vehicle as you're going down the road at 60 miles an hour, just because someone offered you a free bicycle when you're first starting out. So those are the kinds of things that I tell my clients to be mindful of when they're trying to build their business up front, because you really need to think of the transformation. Like, where do you want to go? What's your destination? Rather than, oh, there's a free bicycle, or, oh, there's a Lamborghini that this expert is using and I want that.
Oh yeah,
so
that's too. I have done both ends of that spectrum. So thinking about the journey or the experience that your client, and that also means your team member as well, what experience you would want them to have. Like for a team member, we want them to be empowered to eventually make decisions and run with that, whatever process we're giving them. And for our clients, we want them to feel heard and nurtured, or that the project is moving forward. Okay, so we have an end result of where we want to go. And you mentioned something before we got on the recording, is like start with the end in mind. So you decided that this is the end that you want, and then work backwards. And then is it like more in a summary format, like capture bigger pictures? Because that's what I had. That's what I ended up doing with my intern, is I captured the big pictures and then did a training, and then they helped me fill in the space, because again, I knew that I would get lost in the details. And so I needed to bring a team member on to help with that. So if they're doing it on their own though, and they're getting lost in the space, how can they find a different way of doing it? Because that's what this is all about, out of box thinking. So how can they find an innovative way of thinking about it?
So if we're talking about like having like a team member to do it on our behalf, so what I typically do for my team members is that I would record how I'm doing it on like Loom and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then I would say, okay, like here's how I do it. And, like take this and then see if you can improve this, because there's one way that I can do it, but then of course there's always different ways to doing it, because sometimes we're so caught up deep into the way that we are doing the process that we can't see like like the different things that we are doing anymore. And then the other thing to consider too in regards to like like the different processes is that like the start with the end in mind is sometimes like if you want something done, sometimes we end up micromanaging of like okay, well, I want XYZ done. Well, is that really the XYZ you want done? Or do you really just want, like to send a message to your client? Like you don't necessarily need, you can show them how you're doing it, but at the end of the day, do you just really want them to get the task done? Or do you want them to get the checklist done? So that's the two different ways why I show them how I do it. And then I tell them what exactly I want done at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, it's helpful often to do these processes in collaboration. Yes. Because as the business owner, as the person who's like been doing all these processes ourselves, it's often hard for us to see how to innovate sometimes. And so bringing in somebody like a team member, or even a collaborative partner, maybe you're doing an accountability partner, or working with a consultant like you that can see that, because I'm hired a consultant to work with me as well to see that, because they can make these beautiful workflows, and that's not my gift. So that's helpful to do, to think about. It doesn't have to be just you. And to make these types of changes, sometimes we have to bring in some collaboration. And then I love the idea of Loom. And the other one I found was that you could even, I get a lot of thought processes pop into my head when I'm driving. And so right. One of the times you could record on your audio on your phone, and then somebody could help translate that into something. So where do you think the best? Like I need to talk it out, that's my process. And so I need to talk it out, and then I can streamline it a little bit. So thinking about what your best way is interesting. So Loom is a good tool to use for that. And when we have a team member or somebody's helping us work this process out, I guess make it simple, right? That's the thing, we want to make it simple. So a Word document, and then you can expand on that later. But is that where you recommend clients to do, is first use some type of just easy capture tool for that?
Okay, so if you don't mind, I want to back up just a minute here, because we were talking about like hiring someone versus like like automation. So my recommendation is, if you're just starting out, you may not necessarily need to hire someone yet, right? You need to figure out what processes you need to do, because it's something that like if it's specific to touching base with your client, it might be like the I don't know if a lot of people might be familiar with the Eisenhower matrix, right? The do is the urgent versus important. So the things that might be most important to you. So for me, there's two things: the relationship building activities, like what we're doing here with Connie today, and the revenue generating activities. So those two things are my focus for my business and what I tell my clients as well. But at the end of the day, everything else might just be like on fire, but not necessarily really that important at the end of the day. So those are the things that you can definitely either automate or delegate. But I like to automate things first before I delegate them, because even though you're spending the money upfront to create that automation process, the sustainability in the long run, it's still going to save you money because you're not spending that. Connie, you like the numbers, the cost perspective. So like it's fixed cost. It's not like this recurring cost that you're paying someone hourly basis to keep repeating that same task. So now you're freeing time versus the money on that. So automate something if you can, and then delegate something. So when you're delegating, now we're getting to the heart of what your question is in regards to like, how do you delegate? To try to keep it simply, for me, to your point, you can create a Loom video to walk them through the process, and then have them create the Word document so that you can have them create a standard operating procedure for you going forward. So that is how I typically do it. And then I assign them a Trello or Asana project plan. So that is my long answer. I apologize for that but that's my whole process.
No, that's great. And it's good for people to, again, keeping the end in mind, that eventually is where you're going to go. It may start with a video, but I love the thought of processing of automation first, thinking, how can you automate first? And 20 years ago when I started my business, there wasn't a lot of automation tools in place. And people were really stuck on, if I stay with the tool, let's talk about, QuickBooks Desktop. I'm in a tool. I'm never going to change this tool. I'm going to stay here forever. That is not the case nowadays, is that tools change all the time. And we have to keep that innovation top of mind as we're looking at things. And so not every year do you have to change your tool, but can reconsider, is this tool still working? Is this automation still working? Is this process still working? And giving it a little dust off, or like I've switched 2 tools so far this year and looking to switch a third one. So there's always opportunities for those things. And I think, is there something, do you ever come across clients that are a little afraid to make that change?
I feel like it's all the time, because it's just, like tech is already scary. And then asking someone to change is also scary. So it's just one of those things that educating someone is really the key part of it for a lot of, like not just for my industry, but I think for a lot of different clients as well.
Yeah. So it's about, these series are about getting out of our thought process. These were originally started pre-COVID, when COVID first happened, and business had to be really super innovative. And why I like this conversation, Dianne, was that processes are something we have to keep on top of. I think I didn't think about them at all until I was probably 10 years into my business. And then I thought about them, and I struggled a lot with it. And so as businesses want to leverage their time, automation is the first step, like you mentioned, and then you may be outsourcing. And so to make a better outsourcing experience for yourself, having something documented. And again, remember that you may not have all the answers. So you may need to bring in a consultant, like a drop in a consultant here or there for the different processes, or work with somebody in an accountability group, where collaboration is really important. And then evaluate them on a regular, ongoing basis. Right? So we got that process.
Correct.
Awesome. So keep on top of your innovation and keep looking for ways to think outside the box. And so, Dianne, you've got a couple of great things for people. You've got a great Facebook community, because every time you go out and try something new, you shoot a video and tell people all about it in the community. So tell people about what that is and how best to reach you and what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for asking. So I do have a Facebook group, and Connie is part of that. So it's Facebook.com/group/passion breakthrough community, or all my links are in passionbreakthrough.com/links. So you can just click one of those links as well, because I feel like, it's easiest that way. And also on Instagram, I'm starting to be more active. So I'm sharing a lot more stuff on there as well. Like the podcast that we are doing, I'm putting it on there as well that we did last time.
Nice. Okay. And we'll put that in our show notes as well.
Perfect.
Any last thoughts about processes or a quote you might want to leave us with?
It is intimidating. I just want to let everyone know that, and you're not alone in that. So if there's anything, like Connie said, if you have an accountability partner you can bounce ideas off on, you can work with me or someone like me. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the whole point of this, is because it might not be your zone of genius, but it's someone else's zone of genius. So you can focus on your zone of genius and grow your business. That is something that you need to consider so that you can move forward and continue to help others.
Oh, that's excellent. Yes. Processes are the key, not only for growing your business, but also to get you out of the hustle of growth. And someday, if you're, growing your business 6 to 7 figures, think about legacy, because businesses that have written processes, that have duplicated systems that they can put into place, are much easier to sell and will bring a bigger asset to you in the long run. So taking the time to think that out and create that will save a lot of time as you get into multi-6, 7 figures. It's a necessity. So thank you, Dianne, for being here today.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks, everybody, for watching Out of the Box, and we'll see you next time. Bye.